The skies of Vidian burned crimson as another destroyer cult ship crossed the upper atmosphere. From his position in the transport vessel's observation deck, Damien Thorne watched the flames lick across the horizon, illuminating the crystalline temples that dotted the capital city's skyline. Each structure caught the light differently, refracting it in prismatic patterns that would have been beautiful under any other circumstances. "We're approaching the drop zone, Tactician Thorne," announced the pilot. An Athani woman whose silver-flecked skin reflected the emergency lights pulsing through the cabin. "The situation has deteriorated since your briefing. 3 more temples have fallen." Damien nodded grimly, adjusting the tactical display on his wrist computer. "How close can you get me to the central temple?" "Within half a kilometer. Any closer and we risk drawing destroyer attention." "That'll have to do." The Athani woman, Ketra, according to her flight insignia, banked the transport sharply, diving beneath a layer of acrid smoke. "The High Council didn't tell me much about you, human. Just that you're some kind of tactical genius. Is that true?" Damien smiled thinly, checking the charge on his pulse rifle. "I've won battles that couldn't be won. Let's leave it at that." "Against the destroyer cults? Because they're not like any enemy you've faced before." "No one ever is." The transport shuddered as distant explosions sent shockwaves through the atmosphere. Through the viewport, Damien could see the once proud capital of Vidian in ruins. Ancient structures of gleaming metal and stone lay crumbled alongside modern buildings. Fires raged unchecked across entire districts. And above it all, destroyer cult ships hovered like vultures. Only the temples remained largely untouched, their crystalline structures somehow resistant to the bombardment. The central temple rose from the heart of the city, its translucent spires reaching toward the sky like pleading fingers. "That's where you're headed," Ketra said, pointing to the largest spire. "The last stronghold of the High Priesthood. If it falls—" "It won't," Damien replied with more confidence than he felt. The transport jolted violently as a nearby explosion rocked the air. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. "We've been spotted," Ketra hissed. "I can't take you any closer. You'll have to jump." Damien was already moving toward the exit hatch, slipping his tactical helmet over his close-cropped dark hair. "Get yourself to safety. The High Priest Valan will meet you inside the temple. Look for the golden insignia, and Damien." Ketra's golden eyes fixed on his. "The temples are more than just buildings. Remember that." Before he could ask what she meant, the hatch opened, and Damien leapt into the chaos of Vidian's dying capital. The fall was shorter than expected, cushioned by the strange atmosphere of Vidian that seemed thicker near the temples. Damien landed in a controlled roll, immediately taking cover behind a fallen monument. The air tasted of ozone and something sweeter, like incense or perfume. Around him, the city was eerily quiet despite the destruction. No civilians, no defender forces, just emptiness and the occasional rumble of distant bombardment. Keeping low, Damien made his way toward the central temple. Its crystal walls seemed to pulse with an inner light that shifted between golden and pale blue. As he approached, he realized the structure was even larger than it had appeared from the air, towering at least 300 meters above the plaza that surrounded it. No visible entrance presented itself. The crystal surface was seamless, without doors or windows. Damien circled the base, keeping to the shadows, his tactical display searching for heat signatures or energy fluctuations. Nothing. "How am I supposed to get in if—" His thought was interrupted by a tremor that shook the ground beneath his feet. A section of the crystal wall before him rippled like water, and an opening appeared. Standing in the newly formed doorway was a tall figure draped in shimmering robes that seemed woven from the same crystalline material as the temple itself. The figure's face was mostly obscured by an ornate headdress, but Damien could see enough to recognize the golden insignia Ketra had mentioned. "High Priest Valan?" The figure nodded once. Tactician Thorn, you've arrived just in time. Please, follow me. Without waiting for a response, Valan turned and glided back into the temple. Damien hesitated only briefly before following. The crystal wall ceiling shut behind him. Inside, the temple was a marvel of light and geometry. The exterior crystal somehow filtered the red glow of the burning city into pure white illumination that bounced off every surface. Corridors branched in all directions, some leading upward, others down into what Damien assumed were lower levels. The destroyer cults have surrounded the city, Valan said as they walked. They've taken control of every temple except this one and 3 others in the outer districts. Why the temples? Damien asked. Strategic value? Valan's expression was unreadable. You truly don't know, do you? The High Council told you nothing of why you were summoned? They said you needed tactical expertise to repel the destroyer cults. That's my specialty. A sound like distant chimes echoed through the corridor. Valan's pace quickened. The temples are not merely places of worship. Tactician Thorn. They are nodes in a planetary network of power, what our ancestors called the ley lines. The destroyer cults seek to corrupt this network, to turn our own planetary defenses against us. They entered a vast chamber at what Damien guessed was the heart of the temple. Unlike the stark white corridors, this room glowed with a warm golden light that seemed to emanate from the very walls. At its center stood a raised dais, supporting an altar of the same crystal as the temple exterior. Around the altar, a dozen Athanian robes similar to Valan's were engaged in what appeared to be a ritual, their hands moving in synchronized patterns above the crystal surface. The air above the altar shimmered with energy. This is the inner sanctum, Valan explained. The final defense. If the destroyer cults breach this chamber, all is lost. Damien surveyed the room with a tactical eye. No weapons, no defensive systems? We have other protections, Valan replied enigmatically. But they are failing. That is why we called for Earth's help. That is why we called for you. Specifically. Me specifically. I don't understand. Valan moved toward the altar, gesturing for Damien to follow. As they approached, the other priests stepped back, creating a path. Place your hand upon the altar, Valan instructed. Damien hesitated. Why? Because you are goddess-touched. Tactician Thorn. The genetic analysis your people shared with the High Council revealed markers we have seen only once before, in the bloodline of those who could channel the power of the ley lines. That's ridiculous. I'm just a tactician. You are much more. Please, we have little time. A tremor stronger than before shook the temple. In the distance, Damien heard what sounded like an explosion. They've breached the outer defenses, one of the other priests announced. The corruption field is expanding. Valan's eyes bored into Damien's. Now, tactician, place your hand upon the altar. Against his better judgment, Damien reached out and placed his palm flat against the crystal surface. The effect was instantaneous. Energy surged up his arm, not painful but overwhelming in its intensity. The golden light in the room brightened to near blinding levels. The crystal beneath his palm warmed, then seemed to liquefy, flowing up and around his hand like living metal. Voices filled his mind, thousands of them, speaking in languages he couldn't understand but somehow comprehended. Images flashed before his eyes, star maps, ancient battles, faces of beings both human and utterly alien. And then silence, complete and absolute. When Damien's vision cleared, the room had changed. The priests stood frozen in expressions of awe and fear. The golden light had concentrated into a column that rose from the altar to the vaulted ceiling. And within that column of light stood a woman. No, not a woman, something more. She hovered above the altar, her body partially translucent, as if composed of the same crystal as the temple. Wings of pure energy extended from her shoulders, casting prismatic patterns across the chamber. Her eyes, when they opened, were pools of golden light without pupil or iris. "Halai!" Valan whispered, dropping to his knees. The other priests followed suit, prostrating themselves before the apparition. The being, Halai, turned her gaze to Damien, who remained standing, his hands still connected to the altar by threads of crystalline energy. "You have awakened me, human," she spoke, her voice resonating not through the air, but directly in Damien's mind. "After 3,000 years of slumber, I didn't mean to," Damien managed to reply. A sound like distant bells rang through the chamber. It took Damien a moment to realize Halai was laughing. "Few intend to awaken a goddess," she said. "Yet here we are." Another tremor shook the temple, more violent than before. Dust and small crystal shards fell from the ceiling. "The destroyer cults," Valan said urgently from his kneeling position. "They've nearly broken through. Great Halai, we beg your intervention." Halai's expression darkened. "I sense the corruption. It has spread far in my absence." Her gaze returned to Damien. "You carry the blood of my chosen. That is why you could awaken me. But my power alone will not be enough to stop what comes. I will need a channel, a focus." "What do you mean?" Damien asked. "She means you. Tactician Thorn," Valan explained, rising slowly to his feet. "You must become her instrument." Before Damien could protest, Halai descended from her column of light, coming to stand before him. Up close, her form was even more otherworldly, skin like polished crystal, with veins of golden energy pulsing beneath the surface, hair that moved as if underwater despite the still air of the chamber. "Your tactical mind, my power, together, we might yet save Vidian," she said. "Will you join with me, descendant of my chosen?" Another explosion rocked the temple, closer this time. Warning lights flashed across Damien's tactical display. "They've breached the lower levels," one of the priests called out. "The corruption field is expanding." Damien looked into Halai's luminous eyes. "I don't understand any of this. Goddesses, ley lines, chosen bloodlines. It's not rational." "Yet, here I stand before you," Halai replied. "And here you stand, connected to powers you never knew existed." She extended a hand that shimmered between solid and ethereal. "Sometimes, tactician, victory requires more than rational thought. It requires faith." Damien thought of Earth, of the reports he'd read about the destroyer cults and their systematic annihilation of world after world. If Vidian fell, his home planet might be next. He took Halai's hand. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. His consciousness expanded, suddenly aware of the entire temple complex, of the ley lines that ran beneath the city like luminous rivers, of the corruption that was spreading through them like poison. Through Halai's perception, he could see the destroyer cult ships hovering above the city, 8 of them, arranged in a formation designed to concentrate their corruption field on the remaining temples. "I can see them," he gasped. "All of them." "And they can see us now," Halai replied, her voice both in his mind and in the chamber. "The awakening of a goddess is not a subtle event." Indeed, as if in response to her words, the nearest destroyer ship altered its course, moving directly toward the central temple. "What's the plan?" Damien asked, military training reasserting itself through the wonder of the connection. Halai smiled, and it was like watching stars being born. "You are the tactician, I am the weapon. Guide me." Damien closed his eyes, focusing on the tactical situation as it unfolded in his expanded awareness. The destroyer cults had taken most of the city, but were focused on capturing rather than destroying the temples. They were extending their corruption field through the ley lines, turning the planet's own energy against it. "We need to break their hold on the corrupted temples," he said, "then use the purified network to strike back." "A sound strategy," Halai agreed. But the corruption is deep. Cleansing it will require direct intervention. Then that's what we'll do, Damien decided. Starting with the nearest compromised temple. Can you transport us there? Halai nodded. Through the ley lines, yes. But be warned, where the corruption has taken hold, my powers will be diminished, and the destroyer cultists will sense our arrival. We'll have the element of surprise, at least initially, Damien countered. And sometimes, that's all you need. He turned to Valan. Keep this temple secure. We're going to cleanse the network and drive the destroyers back. The high priest bowed deeply. May Halai's light guide you. Halai extended her wings, enfolding Damien within them. The sensation was like being immersed in warm, liquid light. Hold to me, she instructed. The passage through the ley lines can be disorienting for mortals. Damien barely had time to brace himself before the world dissolved into streams of golden energy. His body felt simultaneously weightless and unbearably heavy, stretched across distances his mind couldn't comprehend. Then, just as suddenly, reality reasserted itself. They stood in another temple chamber, similar to the one they'd left but corrupted, where the central temple had glowed with golden light. This one pulsed with sickly green energy. The crystal walls were veined with darkness, like infection spreading through living tissue. Halai's form dimmed noticeably, her wings pulling close to her body. The corruption is strong here, she said, her voice strained. It feeds on the pain of those they've taken. Damien's tactical display flickered, then stabilized, showing multiple heat signatures approaching their position. We've got company, he warned, raising his pulse rifle. At least a dozen, moving in fast. The cultists, Halai confirmed. They've sensed my presence. Where's the temple's altar? We need to purify it first, right? Halai pointed toward a doorway across the chamber. Through there, but the way will be guarded. Then we fight through, Damien said grimly. You said I'm your guide, so follow me. And let's show these destroyers what happens when they face a goddess and her tactician. As if on cue, the doorway to their chamber burst open. 3 figures entered, humanoid in basic shape, but wrong in every detail. Their skin was mottled gray and green, with pulsing veins that matched the corruption in the temple walls. Where eyes should have been, they had only swirling vortices of the same sickly energy. Corrupted Athani, Halai whispered. Once temple guardians, now slaves to the destroyer cult. The corrupted guardians advanced, wielding weapons that seemed grown rather than manufactured, twisted amalgamations of metal and organic material that dripped with viscous fluid. Damien fired his pulse rifle. The energy burst, striking the lead guardian in the chest. It staggered but didn't fall. Conventional weapons have limited effect, Halai warned. They are sustained by the corruption. Then we need something unconventional, Damien replied, an idea forming. Can you channel energy through me, like at the altar? Halai nodded, understanding immediately. She placed her hand on Damien's shoulder, and he felt the now familiar surge of power flow into him. It was weaker than before, but still potent. As the corrupted guardians closed in, Damien raised his free hand. Golden light erupted from his palm, striking the lead guardian. Where the light touched, the corruption hissed and receded, like darkness fleeing from dawn. The guardian screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and collapsed, its form shimmering and then resolving into that of an ordinary Athani, unconscious but alive. It worked, Damien exclaimed. The corruption can be cleansed, Halai confirmed, but it drains my power significantly in this compromised space. The remaining guardians hesitated, then attacked with renewed ferocity. Damien and Halai fought their way through, him directing her power with tactical precision while she amplified his natural abilities, making him faster and stronger than any normal human. They moved through corridors crawling with corruption, facing more guardians and stranger entities, beings composed entirely of the sickly green energy. like living manifestations of the destroyer cult's power. Finally, they reached the temple's inner sanctum. Unlike the central temple's altar, this one was encased in a cage of dark energy, and around it stood 5 figures in elaborate armor that seemed to shift and move of its own accord. Destroyer cult priests, Halai identified them. The ones controlling the corruption in this temple. The cult priests turned as one, raising staffs topped with crystals that pulsed with the same corrupt energy that infested the temple. "The Awakened One," hissed the central figure, its voice distorted as if speaking through liquid. "You are too late, goddess. The ley lines are ours now. Soon, your entire planet will feed our ascension." "I don't think so," Damien replied, raising his pulse rifle. "Halai, on my mark, channel everything you've got through the rifle." Halai placed both hands on the weapon, which began to glow with golden light. "Fools," the cult priest snarled. "Your light is a candle against our storm." "Now!" Damien shouted, pulling the trigger. The pulse rifle discharged, not its usual energy burst, but a beam of concentrated golden light that split into 5 perfect trajectories, striking each cult priest simultaneously. They screamed in unison, their armor cracking and dissolving. Damien didn't wait to see them fall. He sprinted toward the altar, Halai right behind him. "The cage," she said urgently. "We must dispel it before I can cleanse the altar." Damien examined the dark energy construct. "It's a frequency pattern. There must be a resonance we can exploit." He adjusted his tactical display, scanning for weaknesses. "There, where the energy loops back on itself, if we hit it with a counter-frequency." "I understand," Halai said. She raised her hands, which began to vibrate at a visible frequency. The cage responded, its energy pattern fluctuating. "It's working," Damien encouraged. "Keep going." Halai's form brightened as she poured more power into the counter-frequency. The cage's energy patterns grew more erratic until, with a sound like shattering glass, it collapsed. "Now," Halai gasped, clearly weakened by the effort. "Touch the altar, as you did in the central temple." Damien placed his hand on the corrupted crystal. Unlike the warm, welcoming energy of the central temple, this felt cold and resistant, like plunging his hand into ice water. He gritted his teeth against the sensation. "Channel through me," Halai instructed, placing her hands over his. "Your blood remembers the true frequency of the ley lines, even if your mind does not." Damien closed his eyes, focusing on the warmth of Halai's touch against the cold of the corruption. In his mind, he visualized the golden energy he'd seen flowing through the ley lines, pushing back against the sickly green. The altar began to vibrate beneath their hands. The cold sensation intensified, then suddenly broke, replaced by a rush of warmth. Damien opened his eyes to see the corruption receding from the altar, from the walls, from every surface of the temple. The sickly green energy was being replaced by the same golden light that filled the central temple. Above them, through the crystal ceiling, Damien could see one of the destroyer cult ships shudder and then begin to move away, as if repelled by the cleansed temple. "It's working," he breathed. Halai nodded, her form growing brighter as the temple purified. "1 down, 3 to go. And then we take the fight to them." Over the next several hours, Damien and Halai repeated the process at the remaining corrupted temples. Each cleansing was harder than the last, as the destroyer cults realized what was happening and concentrated their forces to stop them. At the second temple, they were met by a contingent of fully transformed cult members, beings that had once been humanoid, but had surrendered their forms entirely to the corruption, becoming monstrosities of twisted flesh and pulsing energy. "They cannot be saved," Halai said grimly, as they fought their way through. "The transformation is complete." Damien nodded, adjusting his tactics accordingly. Where he had sought to cleanse the corrupted guardians, He now focused on destroying the transformed cultists, channeling Halai's power through his rifle to dissolve them entirely. The third temple was guarded by mechanized sentries, drones corrupted by the cult's energy, and reprogrammed to protect the anchor points of the corruption field. Damien's tactical expertise proved crucial here, as he identified and exploited weaknesses in their patrol patterns and defensive protocols. As they cleansed each temple, Halai grew stronger, her form more solid, her powers more potent. And as the ley lines were purified, Damien found his connection to them deepening, his ability to channel and direct their energy becoming more intuitive. Between battles, in the brief moments of respite as they traveled through the cleansed ley lines, Damien and Halai began to learn about each other. "Why did you sleep for 3,000 years?" he asked, as they prepared to assault the final corrupted temple. Halai's expression grew distant. "After the Great Sundering, what your people might call a civil war, the surviving goddesses chose to enter stasis. The planet was wounded, the ley lines damaged. Our presence was causing more harm than good. We agreed to sleep until called upon by the blood of our chosen." "And that's me, one of your chosen?" "A descendant." "Yes. Your ancestors were among those who could hear the song of the ley lines. We called them the Harmonious. They served as intermediaries between my kind and the general population." "So I'm what, part Athani?" Halai smiled. "No. Tactician. The Harmonious were human. My kind visited your world long before recorded history. We left our mark in your genes, in your myths, in structures your archaeologists still cannot explain." The implications were staggering. "Are there others like me on Earth?" "Perhaps. The bloodline has thinned over millennia, but you are proof it survives." Their conversation was interrupted by their arrival at the final temple, the largest of the corrupted structures, directly beneath the destroyer cult's command ship. This temple was different from the others. The corruption had progressed further, transforming the crystal structure into something organic and monstrous. Pulsing veins ran along every surface, and the air itself seemed thick with microscopic particles that glowed with the now familiar sickly green light. "This is their stronghold," Halai said, her voice tight. "The focal point of their corruption field." Damien's tactical display struggled to function in the dense atmosphere. "Any allies we can call on? The priest from the central temple, maybe." Halai shook her head. "They must maintain the defenses there. We are alone in this." "Then, we'll have to be enough," Damien replied, checking his pulse rifle. After channeling so much of Halai's energy, the weapon had transformed, its standard military design now augmented with crystalline components that hummed with power. They made their way deeper into the corrupted temple, facing increasingly fierce resistance. Transformed cultists, mechanized sentries, and new horrors, floating orbs of condensed corruption that exploded into caustic mist when destroyed, all tried to halt their advance. But Damien and Halai had become a seamless team. His tactical mind anticipated threats before they materialized, while her godlike power turned his strategies into devastating action. They moved together, as if they'd fought side by side for centuries, not hours. When they finally reached the inner sanctum of the final temple, they found not an altar, but a massive pillar of corrupt energy that extended through the ceiling, connecting directly to the destroyer command ship hovering above. Around the pillar stood a semicircle of figures unlike any they'd faced before. They wore armor of living metal that crawled across their skin like insects, and their faces were hidden behind masks that displayed only swirling vortices of energy. The destroyer conclave. Halai identified them, her voice barely above a whisper. "The leadership of the cult. I did not expect them to be here in physical form." "Is that good or bad for us?" Damien asked, already calculating angles of attack and defensive positions. "Both. They are immensely powerful, but also vulnerable in their corporeal state." One of the masked figures stepped forward. "The awakened goddess and her human pet," it said, its voice resonating oddly, as if speaking from multiple throats simultaneously. "You have caused us inconvenience." "We're just getting started," Damien replied, raising his transformed rifle. "Your resistance is futile," the figure continued. "For every temple you cleanse, we will corrupt 2 more. For every world you save, we will consume 10. The universe tends toward entropy, toward destruction. We are merely accelerating the inevitable." "Nothing is inevitable," Halai countered, her wings flaring with golden light. "Life finds a way. Creation persists." "Pretty philosophies," the figure dismissed. "But they will not save you now." As if on cue, the remaining members of the conclave raised their hands in unison. The pillar of corruption pulsed, and tendrils of sickly energy lashed out toward Damien and Halai. Halai erected a barrier of golden light, but the corruption began to eat through it immediately. Acid against metal. "The pillar!" Damien shouted over the hissing of corruption against light. "It's drawing power directly from their ship. We need to sever the connection." "I cannot reach it through their combined power," Halai replied, strain evident in her voice as she maintained the failing barrier. Damien's tactical mind raced. The conclave members were arranged in a specific pattern around the pillar, a geometric formation that seemed to amplify their channeling abilities. "If we disrupt their formation," he theorized, "we might create an opening." Halai nodded her understanding. With a gesture, she sent a pulse of golden energy along the floor, creating momentary disruption beneath the feet of one conclave member. As the figure staggered, Damien fired his rifle. The enhanced energy burst, striking precisely where the cultist's stance had weakened. The masked figure shrieked as golden light spread across its armor like a wildfire, consuming the living metal. It fell, breaking the formation. Immediately, the combined attack of the remaining conclave members faltered. Halai seized the opportunity, driving a spear of pure light through the gap in their defenses, striking the corruption pillar. Where her light touched the pillar, the corruption recoiled, but only momentarily before surging back stronger. "It's too powerful," Halai gasped. "The connection to their ship is feeding it faster than I can cleanse it." Damien analyzed the situation with cold clarity. "Then, we need to use their own power against them." He pointed to the network of veins pulsing across the chamber's ceiling. "Those carry the corruption energy from the pillar throughout the temple, right?" "Yes, but if we reverse the flow, force the energy back into the pillar all at once." Halai's eyes widened as she grasped his plan. "It would overload the connection to their ship, but such a reversal would require tremendous power, more than I can currently channel in this corrupted space." "What about the purified temples? Can you draw power from them through the ley lines?" "In theory, yes, but I would need to be in direct contact with a ley line nexus." Damien scanned the chamber. "Where would that be in this temple?" "Beneath the pillar itself. All temples are built around a nexus point." The conclave was regrouping, their combined power focusing once more on the golden barrier that was now barely holding. "I'll create a distraction," Damien decided. "When I give the signal, drop the barrier and make for the pillar." Without waiting for her response, Damien rolled to the side of the barrier and fired a series of precisely aimed shots at the ceiling above the conclave members. The crystalline structure, weakened by corruption, shattered, raining debris down on the cultists. "Now!" Damien shouted. Halai dropped the barrier and flew directly toward the pillar, her form a golden streak across the chamber. The conclave members, momentarily distracted by the falling debris, redirected their attack too late. Halai reached the base of the pillar and plunged her hands into the floor beneath it. Golden light spread from her touch, cutting through the corruption like sunlight through fog, revealing the ley line nexus beneath, a swirling vortex of energy that had been perverted from its natural golden state to the sickly green of corruption. As the conclave recovered and advanced on her position, Damien laid down covering fire, his enhanced rifle holding them at bay, but not for long. "Hurry," he called to Halai. "Whatever you're going to do it now." Halai's form began to glow brighter, pulsing in a rhythm that matched the ley line nexus beneath her hands. Through their connection, Damien could feel her reaching out across the purified network, drawing power from the cleansed temples. The Conclave sensed what was happening. Their attacks on Damien intensified, forcing him to duck behind a corrupted column for cover. "They're trying to stop you from protecting me," Halai called to him, her voice strained as she channeled more and more energy. "They know I'm vulnerable while connecting to the network. How much longer do you need?" "Moments only. But Damien, when the reversal happens, the backlash will be catastrophic. We must be shielded." Damien fired another volley at the advancing Conclave members, downing one, but barely slowing the others. "Just tell me what to do." "When I give the word, come to me. I will extend my protection around us both." The air in the chamber began to charge with competing energies, the golden light of the ley lines and the sickly green of corruption, swirling and clashing like opposing storm fronts. The Conclave leader raised both hands, and the corruption pillar pulsed with renewed intensity. Tendrils of dark energy shot toward Halai. "Now, Damien!" she cried. Damien broke from his cover, sprinting toward Halai as corruption energy seared the air around him. He felt it touch his skin, burning like acid, but he pushed through the pain. As he reached her, Halai pulled one hand from the nexus and caught his wrist, yanking him down beside her. In the same motion, she extended her wings, wrapping them around them both like a cocoon of light. "Hold to me," she whispered, her eyes now blazing so brightly he could barely look at them. "And do not let go, no matter what happens." Through the translucent barrier of her wings, Damien watched as the Conclave closed in, their combined power focused on breaking through Halai's protection. Then, with a sound like 1,000 voices crying out at once, Halai completed the reversal. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every vein of corruption in the chamber reversed direction, the sickly green energy rushing back toward the pillar in a tidal wave of power. The pillar itself began to pulse erratically, expanding and contracting as it struggled to contain the sudden influx. The Conclave members staggered, their connection to the pillar becoming their undoing as the reversed energy flowed back into them. Their armor cracked, leaking both corruption and something darker, their true essence. Damien realized. Above them, through the crystal ceiling, the destroyer command ship shuddered violently. Sections of its hull began to rupture, venting the same sickly green energy into space. "Hold fast," Halai commanded, her wings tightening around Damien as the pillar reached critical capacity. The explosion, when it came, was unlike anything Damien had ever experienced. It wasn't sound or light or heat, but rather a fundamental rearrangement of energy, as if reality itself was being rewritten in that moment. The pillar collapsed in on itself, then erupted outward in a wave of pure force that disintegrated the Conclave members and shattered the corrupted temple to its foundations. Protected within Halai's wings, Damien felt rather than saw the destruction. It seemed to last both an instant and an eternity. When it finally subsided, and Halai's wings unfurled, they stood in open air. The temple was gone, reduced to crystal dust that glittered in the air around them. Above, the destroyer command ship was breaking apart, secondary explosions rippling across its surface as it fell from the sky in burning fragments. "You did it," Damien breathed, looking at Halai with new wonder. "We did it," she corrected him, her form now so bright it was difficult to distinguish her features. "Your strategy, my power. As I said, a formidable combination." In the distance, the remaining destroyer cult ships were retreating, fleeing Vidian's atmosphere, as if pursued by unseen forces. "They're running," Damien observed. "The destruction of their command ship has broken their resolve," Halai confirmed. "And without the corruption field, They have lost their primary weapon. She gestured, and a platform of golden energy formed beneath their feet, lifting them above the debris field that had once been the temple. From this vantage point, Damien could see the transformation spreading across the city, where corruption had tainted buildings and streets. Golden light was now flowing, cleansing and restoring. The ley lines, visible to him through his connection with Halai, pulsed with renewed vitality, spreading out from the purified temples like a network of golden rivers. The planet is healing itself, Halai explained. Now that the corruption has been purged from the ley lines, the natural regenerative properties are reasserting themselves. What about the people who were corrupted? The guardians we fought? Those we cleansed directly will recover. The others. Halai's expression saddened. The further the corruption progressed, the less there was to save. Some were already lost before we began. Their platform drifted toward the central temple, which now blazed with golden light like a beacon. As they approached, Damien saw figures emerging onto the temple's crystal balconies, the priests and other Athani who had taken refuge there during the attack. High Priest Valon stood at the forefront, his arms raised in welcome as their platform descended to the main entrance. "The goddess returns victorious," he proclaimed, as they stepped onto the temple grounds. And with her, the human tactician who awakened her. A cheer rose from the assembled Athani. Damien felt distinctly uncomfortable with the adulation, but Halai seemed to take it in stride, acknowledging the crowd with a regal nod. "The destroyer cults have been driven from Vidian," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the gathering. "Their corruption purged from the ley lines. The healing has begun." "All praise to Halai, the awakened one," Valon intoned, and the crowd echoed his words. Halai raised a hand for silence. "The victory belongs not to me alone, but to all who fought, and especially to Tactician Thorn, whose bloodline and brilliance made this possible." All eyes turned to Damien, who shifted uneasily under the attention. "I just did what needed to be done," he said simply. Valon approached, bowing deeply to both of them. "The High Council has been informed of your success. They wish to speak with you both at your earliest convenience." "Lead the way," Halai replied. They were escorted to a chamber high in the temple spire, where a semicircular table of crystal awaited. Seated around it were 5 Athani in robes even more elaborate than Valon's, their skin patterns marking them as elders of their species. "The High Council," Halai whispered to Damien, "the governing body of Vidian and its colonies." The central figure rose as they entered. "Goddess Halai, Tactician Thorn, Vidian owes you a debt that can never be repaid." "Counselor Thane," Halai acknowledged with a slight bow. "The danger has passed, but much work remains to fully restore what was lost." "Indeed," Thane agreed, "which is why we have a proposal for you both." Damien raised an eyebrow. "A proposal?" Thane gestured to an aide, who stepped forward carrying a small crystal cube. When activated, the cube projected a holographic image of a sleek spacecraft unlike any Damien had seen before. "The Explorer," Thane explained. "Our newest and most advanced survey vessel. It was designed to map and monitor the ley line networks across our colonial worlds." "It's impressive," Damien acknowledged, studying the ship's unusual configuration. "But what does this have to do with us?" "The destroyer cults were driven from Vidian. Yes, but they still threaten our outlying colonies and, potentially, Earth itself," Thane continued. "We believe they will seek other ley line networks to corrupt." Halai's expression darkened. "I feared as much. Their kind does not abandon their purpose easily. The Explorer can track ley line disturbances across vast distances," Thane said. "With Halai's power and your tactical expertise, Tactician Thorn, you could intercept and stop the destroyer cults before they establish new footholds." "You want us to hunt them down," Damien realized. "Among other duties, Yes. There are also dormant goddess shrines on several colonial worlds that may need awakening, now that the ley lines are active once more. Damien glanced at Halai, trying to gauge her reaction to this proposal. Her expression was thoughtful, but revealed little. "And Earth?" he asked, turning back to the council. "You mentioned it might be threatened as well." Thane nodded gravely. "Your world has its own ley line network, dormant for millennia, but still intact. If the destroyer cults were to discover this, they would attempt to corrupt it," Halai finished, "as they did here. And Earth has no defenses against that kind of attack," Damien concluded. "No knowledge of the ley lines, no awakened temples." "No awakened temples yet," Thine corrected. "But with Halai's guidance and your goddess-touched blood, that could change." The implications were staggering. Damien had come to Vidian as a military tactician, expected to help repel a conventional invasion. Now he was being asked to become part of something far larger, a defender of worlds, an awakener of ancient powers, a partner to a goddess. He looked at Halai again, and this time she met his gaze directly. In her golden eyes, he saw not just power, but understanding, and perhaps something more, something that had grown between them during their shared battles. "What do you think?" he asked her quietly. "I think we make an exceptional team," she replied, her voice warm. "And I think there is much I would like to show you, about the ley lines, about your heritage, about worlds you've never imagined." "I'm just a tactician," Damien said, echoing his words from when they'd first met. "Or at least, I thought I was." "You are much more," Halai said, echoing her own response. "As am I. Perhaps together, we can discover exactly how much more." Damien turned back to the council. "The Explorer. When can it be ready?" "It awaits your command," Thane replied, unable to hide a pleased expression. "It can be prepared for departure within hours." "Then we accept," Damien said, making the decision for both of them after a confirming nod from Halai. "But our first destination will be Earth, if it's potentially in danger. I want to establish some kind of defense before we go hunting destroyer cults across the galaxy." "A sound tactical decision," Thane acknowledged. "We will provide all necessary data on Earth's dormant ley line network and any records we have of goddess shrines that might exist there." As the meeting concluded and arrangements were made for their departure, Damien and Halai found themselves alone on one of the temple's upper balconies, overlooking the healing city. The skies had cleared of smoke, revealing a sunset that painted the crystalline structures in hues of gold and pink. "Second thoughts?" Halai asked, noting Damien's pensive expression. "No," he replied honestly. "Just adjusting. 24 hours ago. I was a human tactician with a specific mission. Now I'm goddess-touched, bound to an ancient power network, and about to embark on an interstellar journey with an awakened deity." Halai laughed, the sound like distant chimes. "When you put it that way, it does seem rather overwhelming." "What about you?" Damien asked. "You've been asleep for 3,000 years. Now you're suddenly awake and agreeing to travel the stars with me. No second thoughts on your part?" "Goddesses don't get second thoughts," she replied with mock seriousness, then smiled. "But if we did—" "No, this feels right. You feel right. Damien Thorne." The way she said his name sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with the ley line energy they shared. "Earth will be strange for you," he warned. "We don't have crystal temples or ley line awareness. Most people don't believe in goddesses." "They believed once," Halai said softly. "And perhaps they will again. But that is not why I wish to go there." "No, then why?" Her golden eyes met his, and for a moment, the goddess facade fell away, revealing something surprisingly vulnerable beneath. "Because it is your home," she said simply. "And I wish to know everything about you, Damien Thorne, including where you come from." The admission touched something in Damien he hadn't realized was there. a loneliness that had been his companion through years of tactical missions and military postings. The feeling of never quite belonging anywhere or to anyone. "It was my home," he corrected gently, "but I'm not sure where home is now." Halai moved closer, her ethereal form solid enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her. "Perhaps we can discover that together," she suggested, "along with everything else." Below them, the Explorer was being moved from its hangar to a launch platform near the temple. Its crystal and metal hull caught the fading sunlight, gleaming with promise. "A new mission," Damien mused, watching the preparations. "Defending worlds, awakening temples, hunting destroyer cults, and exploring the connection between a goddess and her chosen tactician," Halai added, her voice soft but certain. "I think that may prove the most interesting mission of all." Damien turned to her, really looking at her, not as a goddess or a weapon, or an ally in battle, but as the being who had fought beside him, saved his life, and now offered to share a journey with him. "I think you might be right," he agreed, and reached out to take her hand. When their fingers intertwined, golden energy sparked between them, not the raw power they had channeled in battle, but something subtler and perhaps more significant. A connection that transcended the physical, a resonance between their very essences. As the twin moons of Vidian rose above the horizon, casting their silver light across the healing city, Damien and Halai stood together on the temple balcony, their joined hands a bridge between worlds, human and divine, Earth and Vidian, present and future. Tomorrow, they would board the Explorer and set course for Earth. There would be battles to fight, mysteries to unravel, temples to awaken. But for tonight, they simply existed in this moment of connection, watching the stars emerge in the clearing sky, the same stars that would soon guide their journey together. Somewhere among those stars, the destroyer cults were regrouping, planning their next assault. But they would find their task much harder now, for they faced not just a tactician or a goddess, but something new, a partnership forged in battle and deepening with every passing moment. A human warrior and an awakened goddess, bound together by ancient bloodlines and new purpose. Defenders of the ley lines, protectors of worlds, and perhaps, though neither would say it aloud just yet, something more intimate and profound than either had dared to imagine. As night fell fully on Vidian, the central temple glowed like a beacon, its light reaching out across the stars, a challenge and a warning to any who would threaten the worlds under its protection. And at its highest point, Damien and Halai stood watch, ready for whatever the universe might bring. Together,